Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the Content Patch for the 7th of August 2014. My name is TotalBiscuit, bringing you today's gaming news and comment. In the headlines today, it's got to be only one thing, hasn't it? There's so many things to talk about this week, but this one is perhaps the most immediate, so let's get this out of the way, and then there'll perhaps be more interesting things to discuss in the rest of the week, shall we? This entire episode will be about Twitch TV and its new policy on third-party music in Twitch VoDs, which has resulted in all manner of horrible things occurring, a la the Content ID system. All this in the OC Remix track of the day is coming your way right about now. Twitch TV has announced that they've partnered with Audible Magic, a company that specializes in Content ID matching, the automated system which figures out whether or not something that perhaps doesn't belong to you is being played as part of your video and automatically flags the content. It's been used by a number of companies, including YouTube, who eventually developed their own Content ID system. However, as of the 6th of August, the algorithm from Audible Magic is sweeping video-on-demand content available on the Twitch TV platform and is automatically muting for a period of 30 minutes any piece of the VOD which it detects to contain third-party audio. Now, this is supposed to cover things like regular commercial songs, nothing out of the ordinary there. Hey, you're playing Usher on your stream, you're not really allowed to do that, we're gonna mute the VOD. Now, it only applies to video-on-demand content at the moment, which is not exactly why you go to Twitch TV, but it is a good opportunity to catch up on stuff that you've missed on a live stream. It's currently not applying to the live streams at present. However, it has resulted in a huge number of VODs being muted. These VODs have included the International 4, which for a time was muted due to the use of the Dota 2 audio in an official Dota 2 tournament. A small VOD of Punch-Out for the NES was muted for some reason. One of Twitch's own talk shows run on the official Twitch channel got muted by its own algorithm. In an email sent out to its partners, Twitch claimed that in-game and ambient music was included for past and future VODs with music controlled or owned by clients of Audible Magic. This is a fairly similar, albeit somewhat cruder system that's currently used with YouTube's Content ID, which gives a variety of options for those who are attempting to claim content on YouTube, including merely flagging it, taking a portion of the revenue, taking all the revenue, muting the audio, or actually shutting the video down entirely. With this system, it is possible for the entire video on demand to be muted, which also prevents it from being exported to other platforms. Needless to say, this has caused something of an outcry, with many streamers claiming that they had been unfairly flagged. In the email, Twitch claims that the way to appeal against this is to submit a counter notification compliant with the provisions of the Digital Millennium Copyright Act, the DMCA, which of course governs the US, which is where Twitch is based in the first place. Wow, okay. Well, first things first, don't want to say I told you so, but a lot of us has been saying this is going to happen for a very long time. Twitch was simply getting too big to get away with this, and I'm a bit surprised that they're actually applying it to video on demand. I've got a little bit of a theory as to why that is. In fact, I've got two separate theories. One, of course, being the technical difficulties in matching and filtering live content, which could cause all manner of problems, especially considering that Twitch TV is primarily a live platform. Alongside my other theory that this is Twitch offering something of an olive branch. Now, they're claiming that they're engaging in a voluntary undertaking to try and protect broadcasters and copyright owners. This is a fairly similar move to what YouTube did after the huge Viacom lawsuit in an attempt to prevent future lawsuits from major copyright holders, which could potentially sink the site and maybe even new media as we know it. Now, of course, that resulted in the Content ID system, which we know is far from perfect, and as it stands, YouTube does not arbitrate cases of fair use or the DMCA. The Content ID system is not actually a legitimate DMCA claim. It goes one step further than that and allows you to do so automatically and without filing the proper DMCA paperwork. I've criticized YouTube repeatedly for not properly protecting its content creators and washing its hands of the idea of fair use. And now it comes around to Twitch, which was gonna happen. It was gonna happen eventually, it's now happening, and it's happening in perhaps a less severe way than I initially thought it would, but it is having real consequences. Here's the thing about these automated systems. They don't bloody work properly. They have far too many false positives. And there's a couple of reasons for that. Not only is the technology not perfect, so it's detecting things improperly, But also, the more key factor is the way that music licensing works. Now, what we discovered in the big copyright sweep at the start of this year on YouTube, which hit so many gaming videos, as you're probably well aware by now, is that for some reason, a lot of companies seem to have rights to music that we didn't previously know about. And more to the point, it seems that a lot of the creators of the music didn't know about that either. We had game developers and composers expressing surprise that apparently some random company that they'd never heard of was claiming music that actually belonged to them. You were even getting developer channels where their own music was being claimed. This seems to be primarily down to the way the distribution is done. When a lot of these artists sign up with various services in order to distribute their music and try and automate as much of that as possible because, you know, it's a bit of a pain in the ass to sell everything yourself and process all the payments yourself and all that kind of stuff. As it turns out, those companies are also connected with other companies that spread the license around, and a lot of those companies have databases of content they claim to own and then put blanket enforcement into platforms like YouTube to wipe this stuff out. Now, the problem is this stuff includes video game soundtracks, which is a major component of live streaming for obvious reasons. There are two big implications with this system. The first is that playing stuff through, say, Spotify or Grooveshark or anything like that is probably going to result in your VoDs being muted. If you're playing commercial stuff, you're playing Usher, Jay-Z, whatever, it's probably getting muted. The second component of it is that some video game soundtracks are going to get muted. Now, in terms of the first problem, I frankly don't have a huge amount of sympathy, although I do understand that it's sort of been laissez-faire for this long, and everyone really hasn't thought too much of it, so it's a bit of a shock, especially for those that just like to listen to the music they enjoy while they're streaming a game. Unfortunately, you're gonna run into problems if you continue doing that, but you never really had the right to do that in the first place. Now, of course, there are some, a very small number, but some organizations that do actually pay for the license for that. DreamHack, for instance, can use all of its music under Swedish law and everything's totally fine, they're all above board. And my understanding is that some DreamHack VoDs did get flagged even though they had the rights. And then, of course, you have things like the international VoDs for their own music, things that Valve owns and composes. They're getting their own VoDs flagged for that as well. But let's face facts, there are a lot of gaming live streamers that use music they do not have permission to use. Now, you might be saying to me, well, why does that really matter? You know, I can just listen to this music for free on Spotify anyway. Yes, you can, but that's for personal use. It doesn't give you the right to rebroadcast. There's a number of reasons for that. Spotify, of course, works on a royalty system, meaning that if I go there and I listen to a track, there'll be a very, very small micropayment that is paid to the rights holder. If I broadcast that track to 10,000 other people, then 10,000 people are hearing it, but only one person is getting counted. So that circumvents the way that the system works. And Spotify obviously is just an incredible service, and it's free. I mean, it's amazing that we can listen to so much music and not actually get charged for it. But you have to draw the line at continually rebroadcasting that, because the reason it continues to work is the way that their royalty tracking system works. And if you circumvent that, that becomes a problem for Spotify. And hey, for God's sake, major music labels have had problems with Spotify for a while, even though it is legit, because they feel it undercuts their business model. Which it does, because let's be honest, their business model is out of date. And they've known that for decades, and they've really just been using the law as a hammer to try and crush innovation up to this point. I have very little sympathy for major music labels, by the way. I think it was about 10 years ago when I was doing student radio, we were embroiled in all sorts of things with music licensing companies, and even the shoutcast radio stations were getting hit hard by the RIAA, the Recording Industry Association of America, and their draconian nonsense, trying to basically kill online radio because they viewed it as a threat to their traditional business model. And you know what? They partially succeeded in doing so. However, all that said, you still don't have the right to play commercial music. And you can also argue that doing that enhances your stream and you're earning extra money as a direct result of that, but you're not properly compensating the artist whose work you're using. We already have some issues with the way the gameplay footage is used, and that's very much a work in progress. The law doesn't properly cover it. But the law on music use in that respect is actually fairly clear in most countries. I'm not going to apply it to everybody because there are some countries that have different laws, but US and UK law both pretty much work in the same way. You can't really do that. Now, from the perspective of a YouTuber and a streamer, I'm obviously going to say, look, people don't tune into my stream for my choice of music. They tune in to watch me play and watch me speak. That is all very true. Unfortunately, the law doesn't care about that yet. I mean, hopefully it will eventually, but I don't see that happening for a very long time, and really, it is still very difficult to argue in favor of that. You are broadcasting stuff that does not belong to you, and you're making money in the process. Even if you weren't making money in the process, you're still not really allowed to do that. It annoys me somewhat because I personally have tried to stay above board with everything. I've used stuff that I have permission for. I haven't gone out of my way to play this kind of music, and I'd love to, man. I've been listening to nothing but Blind Guardian over the last couple of days. I would love to share that with my stream. That would be phenomenal. But I can't really do that. And considering I use YouTube so much, and YouTube is even more draconian, I've been extremely careful. I've even done things like not put the radio on in games like Grand Theft Auto, Saints Row, Sleeping Dogs, and Watch Dogs, because I know that they use licensed music there, and they only have the right to use that music within a very specific circumstance, that being in the playing of the game. That doesn't transfer a right to me to rebroadcast that music. It's unfortunate that we've got to this point, but I would like to say that I don't blame the streamers for this, simply because this probably would have happened anyway, even if it wasn't as prevalent as it currently is. But streamers can't really be surprised that it's eventually happening. It's got to be something that they had in the back of their mind saying, well, you know what, I'm getting away with this now, but the chances are I'm not going to be able to continue to get away with that. I suppose in that respect, we should be thankful that it doesn't apply to live streams, and really, video on demand on Twitch makes you next to nothing, so having muted VoDs is an annoyance more so than anything else, and I would also recommend strongly to those that do stream to start recording your VoDs locally if you don't already do it, edit them on your end, and then upload them to YouTube. It's just a much better way. Personally, I don't like uploading raw VoDs to YouTube because I feel it's a subpar experience. Quality is going to be lower than the stuff that I produce offline, and there's a real difference between watching a stream while it's live and getting involved in the interactive element of that, and just watching a VOD, which is not quite the same experience. It's usually a lesser experience. I don't think it's a good idea personally, but hey, that's just me. Now, the real problem with the system comes in the second point that I made, that it is flagging video game soundtracks. Now, I think there's an obvious fair use case to be made here, because the music is a key component of the game. And if what you're saying is, well, yes, you can broadcast the game, then you're also giving a right to broadcast the music. And if you take the music away from the game, that can actually lessen the experience. Now, there's plenty of games where we turn our music off. I turn the Dota music off, and I run my own stuff from OC Remix and the stuff that I've got permission to use. I do the same thing with Hearthstone, because ultimately that stuff gets very repetitive, and a lot of us will turn that off when we play multiplayer games, because you've all heard the music 100 times before, right? But for single-player games, I feel that music is, of course, a very important component of the game, and that removing it does lessen the experience for everybody, and frankly, takes away from, I've got to use the words, the artistic vision of the developer. Now, of course, me prattling on over it also has that effect. But I don't believe that it is unreasonable to have game music on while playing a game. I mean, why would it be? It's supposed to be there. As it stands in the first wave, this has done ridiculous amounts of damage. The speedrunner community in particular is rather salty, and rightfully so, that the VOD system has been changed on Twitch recently, allowing only 2-hour highlights. They're also deleting VODs quite rapidly, so I believe they'll only last for about 2 months if you don't highlight them properly and cut them into 2-hour chunks. And they're claiming that's for storage reasons on their end, but that's causing a lot of problems for speedrunners. These runs can last many, many hours indeed, and doing that highlighting is pretty annoying. And it also means there's just a greater chance that something will get flagged. I mean, the Punch-Out example I gave earlier, it's an NES game. How on earth is that even in the system? Another example is the fact that the soundtrack for Crypt of the Necrodancer is in the Audible Magic library, despite that OST not being officially released. The developers have no idea why it's there, and the game isn't even fully out yet. It's in early access. That is the real problem with these automated systems, and if there is not a way to quickly resolve things, which frankly it doesn't seem like there is. That email from Twitch indicated that you could submit a counter notification for the DMCA. The other party has 14 business days to respond to your counter notification. That means your content can be down for over 2 weeks. Now, it's unlikely that once you file that, they're going to respond and say nope and actually threaten a lawsuit, because once a counter DMCA notification has been filed, that basically says, I dispute this and I'm willing to go to court and you've got to take me to court. And if they don't do that, then the content provider, or at least the content host more specifically, has to bring that content back online. It's really strange to see a system that clearly doesn't respect the DMCA, that being that automated system, but then the requirement on the content creators' end being that they have to comply with the DMCA and the counter notification when an initial DMCA claim wasn't filed in the first place. It may just be that they want it to be all above board just in case they have to use that. Twitch has received proper DMCA complaints in the past and has had to comply with them, so maybe it just wants that paperwork ready just in case that actually does happen. But still, it seems like it would take a while for your average Twitch user to get these kind of things removed if they have been done by mistake, and some of this stuff might not even get removed. Technically, some of these video game soundtracks are legitimately in the Audible Magic Library, and I'm not just talking about stuff like the GTA soundtrack, which obviously is fully licensed music, yet that's a weird case. The whole licensed music thing is a bit strange because it means that you can't really do things like Guitar Hero and rhythm games or maybe Dance Dance Revolution on Twitch because a lot of that music is licensed. And of course in GTA it's part of the experience, but that's the nasty side effect of taking a licensed soundtrack like that. And it's also the reason, like I said before, that I've never played that kind of music on YouTube, because that stuff does get flagged. It's very common to do so. Now, it seems like some of this stuff will get sorted out, but there is a lot of VOD content on Twitch TV, and it's going to take a while to get everything cleaned up. The copyright claim issues that we had back in, I believe, January of this year with YouTube have, for the most part, been cleaned up, but it took a long time. I mean, it took months. That could be a big deal. The Twitch thing is not as important because you're not really depriving people of their livelihood by muting VODs. VODs don't record things like commercial breaks, so you make next to no money off them. And more to the point, most people don't even watch them to begin with. It's more of an annoyance at this point, more so than anything else. And it gets onto my theory about this being an olive branch. The idea that if Twitch is shown to be properly policing themselves to some degree, that these companies will leave them the hell alone, and they will not come down hard on the live stuff outside of just doing DMCA claims. This may be them having to give ground in order to try and keep the status quo. It's possible. The problem is, it is hurting legitimate users at the moment. It is not hurting them as badly as the YouTube thing was, not at all. We're not seeing channels get shut down. We're not seeing people lose out on thousands of dollars of revenue. But this whole thing is clearly a problem, and it's mostly just the way that the system works. Blocking out 30-minute chunks. That in itself is ludicrous. You could potentially have your phone ringtone that goes off for 10 seconds trigger a 30-minute mute on your VOD, so think about that. That clearly needs to be tightened up, and all of this false flagging needs to be dealt with immediately. And of course, it will require help from the developers, just as it was the case when the big YouTube copyright sweep came in. It's going to need developers and publishers to step up and actually help these people out, and it really is to their best interests. Because I have to ask, if I was going to make an argument even in defense of the use of commercial music, I ask who exactly is getting hurt by it? This gets into the piracy argument, which is what a lot of this broadcasting is, technically. You are committing piracy in the same way that pirate radio stations operated. Who is it hurting? Who is it depriving of revenue? If I'm watching a stream, I'm not listening to some other music. I can't because I want to hear this person's commentary. So it's not like, oh, I'm listening to this stream, so that means I'm not going to go to Spotify and click this. No, I'm more likely to go and look up songs that I like the sound of. And let's be honest, almost every stream does properly give you the information as to what song is being played, either via just a little scroller or a Last.fm page, or actually announcing it on the air itself. And that's resulted in all manner of great things happening. I've been in favor of file sharing because I believe that in the long term, it does help promote artists. It really does. And the old model simply isn't working. You cannot kill piracy in this kind of whack-a-mole aggressive style. It does not work. It will simply keep popping up in other places. And for Twitch, we already have people saying, right, well, I'm going to Hitbox, I'm going to Azubo, I'm going to MLG, where I believe this stuff won't happen. And eventually it'll happen there too, but it will just take a little bit longer. Ultimately, outside of the royalty argument about Spotify that I made earlier, which I just debunked myself, because, you know, arguing with myself is really fun. I do it all the time. There isn't actually any harm being done. There is no loss. You can't prove a loss. I heard bits of a song in the background that somebody talked over, so that means there's no chance of me ever buying that song? Come off it. It's the exact opposite of that. This all ties back into the way that royalties have worked with radio for decades. They believe they have the right to a payment every single time a song is broadcast in any form, legally they are, for the most part, right there, outside of the fair use exceptions and things like that. They are right. But I have to ask, one, does that law make sense anymore in the digital age with the way that songs are distributed, both legally and illegally? No, it doesn't. We didn't have streaming services back then. It didn't work the same way. We didn't have all these other ways of monetizing the content and generating revenue. The law has not caught up. And these automated systems are a ham-fisted way of enforcing a law that really is out of date at this point. The backlash, I think, is for the most part justified. I certainly think that some people have gone too far. Of course they have. They always do. There's nothing unusual about that. We are still just talking about VoDs. It's likely it will eventually apply to live, and once that happens, there will be a lot of problems. But if you're going to attack anything, you have to attack just how blind an automated system like this actually is, how difficult it is to appeal the flags themselves and get them removed, and also the false flagging. From the viewer's perspective, it's not actually doing too much to you guys. If all you do is watch live streams, chances are you're not really going to notice the difference. If you do watch a lot of VoDs, then it could affect you. But it is worth noting that VoDs are not watched all that commonly on Twitch, and most people do export to a different platform and take care to edit and actually get rid of things like copyright music that's run during breaks and all that kind of stuff. And Twitch's VoD system is just abysmally bad, and by the looks of it, isn't being improved. I'm not happy with this system. I'm not. It's not as bad as a lot of people are claiming it to be, and to some degree, streamers did bring it on themselves, only to some degree. They contributed to it. I'm not saying it would not have happened anyway, but I'm not really sure why anyone thought it would be okay just to run commercial music in the background and not eventually believe that something would be done about it. It could be the start of many more sweeping changes and crackdowns. It could. But for the time being, my hope is that they get this thing sorted out quickly, they get those who do not deserve the flagging unflagged as rapidly as possible, and that streamers change their practices to avoid using this kind of music if they actually care about their VODs, and also saving their VODs locally so they can upload them elsewhere and bypass the whole system entirely. And really, that is something that you should be doing if you're even considering streaming, and any modern streaming software will allow you to save a copy locally, which you can then edit and upload elsewhere. Alright folks, that wraps me up for the day. Thank you very much for watching the content patch, but before I go, in a twist of interesting irony, I'd like to give you the OC Remix track of the day. Yes, I do have permission for all this stuff, and this is yet another example of how using this music as part of a gaming show is beneficial to the rights holder, because of all of the extra ears they get and visits they get to the site. Here's a track from OC Remix's brand new free album. It is in celebration of the 25th anniversary of the Game Boy. The track, you should all know, this is a very interesting take on it. It's composed by Sir Nuts, it's called Crimea River, and it's the Tetris A-Type theme. Thank you very much for watching, folks. I'll see you next time.